So welcome to the 6th lecture in IC 242 Continuum Mechanics. Today we will be talking about a bit more about the indicial notation. I'll be talking about a couple of very important ideas related to the notation, and we'll be solving a lot of problems today. So pay a lot of attention, because practicing these problems, as I said earlier, is going to improve our understanding of the notation in general. So let's start with one important idea. So this idea we'll call the misuse notation. So misuse here, the word says it all. So what do I mean by misuse? So when I write a vector in the indicial notation, I've been writing this as Vi Ei. Okay, so Vi is denotes the component, and Ei the corresponding vector or the basis vector. And of course, since we have I repeating here, so this is summation over I, so this becomes V1 E1 plus V2 E2 plus V3 E3. But there's a tendency in the use of this notation to write this as simply Vi. Okay, that's the reason I call it a misuse notation, because when I write Vi, what it means is it is just a component. Put I equal to 1, you get the first component of the vector V1. Put I equal to 2, you get the second component, and so on. But we tend to write the whole vector as simply Vi. So it's a bit confusing, but it's so common to use this misuse notation that depending on the context, you have to figure out whether Vi denotes one of the components of the vector V, or it denotes the whole vector V, this whole vector V altogether. Okay, so that's something I wanted to focus on. And the reason behind this is because if you have let's say another quantity sigma ij, so I can count the number of free indices. So in this case the number of free indices is 2, so that makes it a second order tensor. Okay, so just writing sigma ij by itself, in some situation we will say that the stress is denoted by a second order tensor sigma ij. Okay, you would argue that sigma ij is just one of the components of the tensor sigma, second order tensor sigma, where I and j will take certain values, but we tend to write sigma ij altogether as the whole second order tensor. Okay, so that is the reason it's called a misuse notation, because it's confusing in many cases. But when you start using it and when you start misusing it, you will figure out in which situation we are referring to just one of the components of sigma or the whole sigma tensor by itself using this notation sigma ij. So be very careful. You might get confused in the beginning, but when you see this notation used again and again, you will understand, you will get used to misusing it yourself. So the second idea that I wanted to discuss today is, we already have talked about it. So free index versus dummy index. We also call it repeated. An example, so an example of free index, for example, if you have the tensor sigma ij being multiplied with a vector Vj. Okay, so that's completely possible. We talked about this kind of a dot product between a tensor and a vector. So this is a dot product. So you have the index I, in this case, is the free index. It's free because it can take any value, and any value such as 1, 2 or 3. but the index j in this case is a dummy or repeated, because j repeats here. So when you expand this term sigma ij vj, it expands to as a sum of three terms, sigma i1 v1 plus sigma i2 v2 plus sigma i3 v3. So that becomes a sum of three terms. So the j index by itself has no meaning. It is simply a dummy that expands to so you could have used sigma ik vk as well. In that case, k would have been the dummy index. So j by itself has no meaning here. It simply expands to something. Okay, so j is the repeated or dummy index. Now the reason we talk about this idea here is because we want to talk about the order of a tensor. So when I write this expression sigma ij vj, that by itself is a tensor. Okay, and this is a first order tensor because the number of free indices in this one is 1. Okay, so this thing, the multiplication of different tensors in a different way, and this is an inner product here. So when I multiply it this way, it still is a tensor. It has three components in it. So it's a first order tensor or a vector. So let's take another example. So let me take the outer product of two vectors. So remember we used this uv, the dyad of two vectors, and we call this outer product. So this in the initial notation, in our misuse notation, this becomes ui vj. So in the misuse notation, we'll write it ui vj. In many cases, what you'll see is that people will tend to write it as ui vj with angle brackets, just to be a bit more clear that it's not just one of the terms, but it's the whole quantity altogether. But as I said that many times you will not see this. So let's get used to misusing the notation. So ui vj, you have two free indices here. So that means that I can go from 1 to 3 and j can go from 1 to 3 independently. So that becomes a total of 9 components that you can have. So both I and j are free indices. So that means the order of this thing is you have two free indices. So it's a second order tensor. Right? Let's take yet another example. So let's have a tensor times a tensor. So let's call let's have a tensor sigma ij, and then it gets multiplied with another tensor epsilon, which is also a second order tensor, but in this case you have epsilon I k. So that's the product you have. Now you can see that the index I here is repeated. So that simply expands to a sum of three terms where the index I goes from 1 to 3 in the summation. And we have two free indices. So j and k are the free indices. So this becomes second order tensor. So the key idea here is that to find the order of a tensor which is produced as a result of some operation or some multiplication of other lower order tensors is to simply calculate the number of free indices in that mathematical term, and that becomes the order of the tensor in that mathematical term. Now as I mentioned that I'll come back to the word outer product later in this discussion, in this course. So let's talk about the third idea that we'll talk about today is outer product. Okay. So if you have let's say two objects, tensorial objects, so in this case let them be a vector u and a tensor sigma. So if I take the outer product of u and sigma, that becomes u sigma in the symbolic notation, or in our indicial misuse notation that becomes ui sigma j k. If I was to show you using multiplication of these in the matrix form, that would have been difficult, because we'll have to use a three-dimensional matrix in this case. But in the initial notation, it's very easy, because I can see that the number of free indices here are 3. All 3 are free indices. So that means the order of this thing is third order. So it's a third order tensor. Okay. So the word outer product refers to the situation where you take the tensorial objects and you multiply them in such a way so that there is no repeated index as such. I mean, if the repeated index was there in one of the quantities inside it, that is okay, but you multiply them in such a way so that no index is common between the two different objects. So in this case, I is not there in the indices of sigma. So that's an outer product of u and sigma. Okay, and the other thing that we see in outer products is that the order of the resultant product is equal to the sum of the orders of the two quantities. So vector had an order 1 and the tensor had an order 2. So this becomes 1 plus 2 equal to 3. That's an outer product. So the maximum order that you can generate by multiplying these two quantities is called the outer product. The next idea, the fourth idea in today's lecture, is called contraction. These ideas are slightly related, but I'm discussing them as separate sections so that you can understand them separately, and then we'll apply them all together in indicial notation, the use of it. Contraction. Okay. So let's understand what this means. So contraction in the sense of indicial notation means setting two indices equal in a term. Contraction means you set two indices equal to each other in a term. So let's discuss this using examples. So let's say we have a product the same as this one. So you had ui sigma jk, okay, and I want to apply a contraction here. So the idea of contraction is setting two indices equal in a term. So in this case, let me set the index I equal to j. So that's the contraction I want to apply. So we'll call this the outer product. So in this outer product, ui sigma jk, you apply the contraction I equal to j, and let's here, and what you get is ui sigma I k, right? So the order of this thing that we started with was, I'll put it in bracket, was 3. You had 3 free indices here, but when you apply a contraction I equal to j, you are left with only one free index, that is k. So the order becomes 1. So whenever we apply a contraction on a mathematical term, we call that as the inner product. Okay, you take an outer product, you apply a contraction, that gives you an inner product. So that's how you define the inner product, the idea of inner product in the context of indicial notation or in the context of continuum mechanics. Let's take more examples. Let's take an example ui vj. So that's an outer product of u and v, the way we used to write this as u v. Okay. So this outer product has an order of 2 because you have 2 free indices I and j here. So you get a total of 9 terms here if you take the index I from 1 to 3 and j from 1 to 3. If I apply a contraction here, in this case I can apply only one contraction, that is I equal to j. So I get a ui vi, and you can see that there is no free index here. The order of this thing is 0, and this is nothing but the dot product between u and v. So that's a scalar, 0th order tensor, and this is the outer product of u and v. It's an order 2. Okay. So you get this inner product of u and v as u dot v by actually applying a contraction I equal to j on the outer product of u and v. Okay. So that's where you get the idea of inner product of two vectors as u dot v. Okay, so we are seeing a trend here, and the trend also is very easy to capture if you just see the definition, that every contraction, applying every contraction reduces the order by 2. Okay, it's worth writing that. Every contraction reduces the order by 2. Okay, so this has an order, this had an order 3, you applied one contraction, you get an order 1. So 3 minus 2 equal to 1. You had an order 2 here, applied a contraction, 2 minus 2, 0. Okay. Well, let's take more examples. In fact, for the first example that I took, I could have applied a different contraction. I could have applied, in this case, I equal to k. So that would have given me ui sigma ji. Okay. So that again is an order 1 because it has one free index, that is j here. In fact, I'll just erase this because I can apply one more contraction here. So I could have applied I could have applied j equal to k. Okay, so that would have given me ui sigma jj. Okay, that's completely allowed because you had 3 different indices. Doesn't matter if the indices were a part of both the indices are a part of sigma, no problem. Okay, so if you apply that j equal to k, you get a sigma jj, so that ui there's only one index, a free index I here, so the order of this becomes 1, still a vector. Okay. But you cannot apply I equal to j equal to k. Okay, contraction always means you set 2 indices equal to each other. All right. Let's take another example which will make things much more clearer for us. So the outer product here is say epsilon ijk sigma pq. Okay, so you have taken the outer product of epsilon and sigma. Now epsilon, as you can see, also has 3 indices. Okay, earlier the epsilon, the permutation symbol that we're talking about, was always given as epsilon ijk is simply one of the scalar terms in the epsilon, but you can think of epsilon by itself as a third order tensor. We'll talk more about it, whether it's a tensor or not, because we discussed in the beginning that for an object or a quantity to be a tensor, it should satisfy certain properties. But very loosely speaking, we can call this as a tensor, a third order tensor. It has a total of 27 components. So this seems to be an outer product of epsilon and sigma. It has 3 plus 2, 5 free indices. Okay, that's the outer product. So let's apply contraction. Now let's apply two contractions here. Okay, the first one being I equal to K, and the second one being J equal to Q. So let us see what we get. This becomes epsilon I J I, and then sigma P J. So I equal to K, so I, and then we put J equal to Q, so this Q becomes a J. So let's count the number of free indices. So the number of free indices in the outer product was 5. The number of free indices in the inner product is only P, that's 1. Okay, both I and J are repeated here. So what we see is that we apply two contraction, and we saw that every contraction reduces the order by 2. So we have two contractions, so that should reduce the order by 4. So 5 minus 4 equal to 1. And so the idea, I think, has been made clear. So you can apply, and that's what gives us the idea of inner products in an order, in a tensor of an order like 5. I could generate an inner product like this. So other example that we had taken earlier, let's do them. So you have a tensor A and a tensor B. So remember, we wrote let's take the outer product of these. So A I J B P Q. Okay, so that's the outer product. So it has an order of 4. And if I apply the contraction J equal to P, that gives me A I J B J Q. So that's got an order of 2. Okay, 2 free indices I and Q. Okay, so that we discussed that, and we call this, if you remember, we call this A tensor dot B tensor. Okay, single dot. And then we can also do two contractions. So we can do I equals P and J equals Q. So that's going to give us A I J B I J. You can see that the order of this is 0. There is no free index here because you have two contractions. So 2 times 2 4, and 4 minus 4 is 0. And again, we call this A tensor, 2 vertical dots times B tensor. Okay. So both of these, A single dot B and A vertical double dot B, are inner products of second order tensors A and B. Okay. So remember that the inner product, the definition of inner product is coming from doing contractions on the outer product. So that is what we did. And the other outer product, the other inner product we did, A double dot horizontal B, was nothing but setting I equals to Q and J equals to P. So that gave us A I J B J I. I won't write that here, but you can understand that now. Okay. Great. So as I promised earlier that I would explain you the idea of outer and inner products in detail. So we have successfully done that. So that was the fourth important idea in today's lecture. So let's talk about a couple of more ideas before we start solving problems. So the next important idea we'll talk about today is symmetry. Now we have talked about symmetry of matrices, which are objects which are used to denote second order tensors, standard 3 by 3 matrices. So let's start with those examples. So sigma ij. Sigma ij is symmetric if you can write sigma ij as the same as sigma ji. Put any values for I and j and you will see that this holds. So that's the condition for symmetry. But if you have an object, let's say C, which is a third order tensor, Cij, how do you talk about the symmetry in this case? So for this we have to talk about symmetry in two indices. So we say Cijk is symmetric in I and j if Cijk is the same as Cjik. K stays as it is and we swap I and j and make them equal. So that's saying that Cijk is symmetric in I and j. Now the symmetry for this Cijk can again be in I and k. So the symmetry is in I and k. Then you'll have Cijk as Ckji. So this and this are two different kinds of symmetries. You can't just say C is symmetric. Okay, that does not mean anything. You have to mention C is symmetric in which two indices. It could be that it's symmetric in all the indices. Could be a situation, but you have to specify explicitly as to what two indices is C symmetric in. So the second idea, the second part of this idea is called skew symmetry. So we say that sigma ij, well, let's use a separate line for this. We say sigma ij is skew symmetric if sigma ij is minus sigma ji. Okay, yes, the opposite of symmetry is skew symmetry. Now again, similarly, if you had a third order tensor, you have to specify as to which two indices is the tensor skew symmetric in. You can't just say that C is skew symmetric. You have to specify explicitly which two indices. Let's look at a special case, which is epsilon, the permutation symbol epsilon. Now epsilon ijk is skew symmetric in all indices. So what that means is, let's write that first. Okay, so that means any two indices you take, it is going to be skew symmetric in those indices. Epsilon ijk is minus epsilon jik. So any two indices you swap, you'll see that the sign reverses, because any two indices you swap in these three indices, it will change the order in which I, j and k were appearing. So if you have epsilon ijk, if I make it epsilon jik, I have swapped I and j and that reverses the order. If I swap I and k, that becomes epsilon kji, so that reverses the order again. If I swap j and k, that becomes epsilon ikj, so ikj again reverses the order. The epsilon ijk or the permutation symbol is one such tensor that is skew symmetric in all three indices. So I'm very careful when I use the word tensor for epsilon, but you will see why that is the case. For now, we loosely say that it is a tensor of order 3. Okay. So that brings us to the end of these ideas that I wanted to discuss with you in this lecture. Now we'll move on to solving problems. So I'll be solving a couple of problems on the board which will require us to use the ideas of indicial notation that we have learned over the last 4.5 lectures. Let's start solving problems now. So I've got a problem sheet. Right, so we have to show that aijk plus ajki plus ajik times xi, xj, xk is thrice of this quantity. Okay. So we'll start with the LHS and then approach the right hand side to show the expression. So let's expand the left hand side. The first term becomes aijk times xi, xj, xk. So that's that's 1/3 of this, so that's good. The second term is ajki times xi, xj, xk, and the third term is ajik xi, xj, xk. So what we have to show is that this thing is equal to aijk xi, xj, xk, and the third one is also the same as aijk xi, xj, and xk. Okay, so let's take this term. So we'll call it 2. We'll call this one 3. So for the second term, what we can do is there's multiple things we can do. Well, let's do this thing. So we will replace, because remember I is a dummy index, j is a dummy index, and k is also a dummy index. Okay, all of them are repeating. So in the expression, they can be replaced with any other index we want. So what we can do is we can replace j with p, k with q, and I with r, and this becomes then xi, so xr, then xj becomes xp, and xk, k was replaced with a q, so this becomes xq. Okay, so this is the same as this number 2. Okay, the indices are replaced, but remember they are dummy indices, so they can be replaced with any index we want of our choice. Now again we can use the same idea. So since p, q, r are dummy as well, so I can replace them with any other index I want. So I can replace p with I, q with j, and r with k. This becomes a ijk, and xr becomes xk, xp becomes xi, and xq becomes xj. Right, so very smartly we have changed the indices in such a way so that we get an aijk here. But that is completely allowed because in this expression I, j, and k all were repeated or dummy indices. Now remember xi, xj, and xk, they are just vector component, scalar components of a vector x. So we can move them around. Okay, so I can write xi first, does not change anything, then xj, and then xk. Okay, so be careful, and we are not using the misuse notation here. We are simply referring to the components of, I mean, you can think about it. If you expand this as a sum, it really doesn't matter if you write xi before xj or afterwards. In the sum, we'll have the same terms appearing in those 27 terms that we'll have if we expand this. Okay. And that's it. So that is exactly what we want to show. So this this was 1. So we have shown that this is equal to 1. And similarly, we can show that 3 is also equal to 1. In fact, I can do it quickly. I can do all 3 indices. So in this second case, I replace them in steps. So first I replaced ijk with pqr, and then I replace them back with ijk in a different order. So I'll do 2 steps at the same time. So I'll replace j with I with j, and k with k stays as it is. So all j's become I. Sorry. So j was replaced with I. So all j's become I. So this becomes xi. All i's become j. So this becomes xj, and all k's stay k. So this becomes k. Okay, and this you can move around the terms. So this is the same as aijk, right? And then I can move around xi, xj, and xk, which is the same as 1. So this becomes so all both of these are equal to 1. So this becomes thrice of 1, which is the right hand side. Okay, so this implies that LHS is thrice of 1, which is equal to RHS. Done. Right? So it's very important. I mean, this exercise that we have done is quite useful, because when you are trying to show or approach from one expression to the other, this skill with replacing repeated indices with some other index and cancelling terms or adding them to be equal to thrice of something is very important. So the more you practice, the more comfortable you'll get with doing steps like this, and then simplification of expressions or extracting useful expression out of existing ones will become quite straightforward. So the more you practice, the more better you get at these things. Let us try one more example. The next example, well, the next problem that we'll practice now, problem 2. So show using the indicial notation using the initial notation, we have to show that a cross b dot a is 0. So a cross b is a vector. Well, this bracket is implied here. There's no other way you can do this. You can't do a b dot a and then do a cross with a. So you have to show this. I mean, of course, I mean, if you just want to do it in a straightforward way, you can say a cross b is perpendicular to both a and b, and then that dotted with an a gives a 0. True. But we have to practice the initial notation. So let's do it that ways. So I can write vector a as ai crossed bj ej, and then dotted with a k ek. So notice that although the vector a appears twice in the expression, we'll have to use different indices for both a's for the two a's, because I cannot repeat an index more than twice. So let's solve the cross product first. So we get an aibj scalar components go on the left hand side, and ei cross ej is epsilon ij p ep, and this is dotted with ak ek. Again, ak is a scalar component, so that can go on the left. So we get epsilon ij p ai bj ak, and then we have did a mistake, so this was supposed to be ep. That's fine. Then we have ep. Well, I can do it in one step. ep dot ek, so that becomes a delta pk. Right, so both p and k are repeated, so I can replace k with p, so this becomes epsilon ij p ai bj a p. Right? So now we have to show that this thing that we have is 0. So to show this to be equal to 0, we will use an identity that the double dot, the vertical double dot of a symmetric and a skew symmetric tensor is 0. Okay. Let me write the identity here. So if you have a symmetric tensor, let's say Sij, and you have a skew symmetric, let's say let's call it Aij, then their double dot, vertical double dot, that is Sij Aij is 0. I should have discussed that earlier, so I will discuss it. I'll show that this is indeed true, but if you allow me to use it for an instant, so the identity is, if you have tensors such as S and A, where S is symmetric, that is Sij equals Sji, and A is skew symmetric, that is Aij is minus Aji, then when you multiply them, the vertical double dot way, so Sij Aij, this is a 0. So in this case, if I look this expression, then what I have is, I can call these as two third order tensors, okay, which are well, not really two third order, because p is repeated, so I shouldn't call it third order. They are let's look at epsilon. So epsilon is skew symmetric in I and P. Okay, epsilon is skew symmetric in all indices. So epsilon ijp. So in I and P, it is skew symmetric. Okay. And this AIAP, I'll keep the BJ on the right hand side. This thing is symmetric. In I and P, and this is symmetric in I and P. So if you were to take AIAP, I mean this as a dyad of two A's, then consider that as one second order tensor, and consider this as a second order tensor in I and J, then this is I and P, so this becomes skew symmetric in I and P, and this becomes symmetric in I and P. So this is a symmetric AIAP, that's like and this is like Sij, and this is skew symmetric epsilon ijp in I and P. So this times this becomes a 0. Okay, so this is equal to 0. I haven't showed you the identity till now, but I'm using it. So I'll just after this I will show you that this identity is indeed true. So once I show you the identity being true, you can actually go from first principles and show this to be true without using the identity. It's up to you. But that's how it's an extremely important identity that is used in when using indicial notation. Whenever you see a symmetric and a skew symmetric second order tensor or a matrix, then you tend to and if you have a double dot product of those in the sense of Sij Ij, then that product is going to be 0. So let's now show this identity that it is true. So let's start with the LHS. The LHS is Sij Aij. Now S is symmetric, so I can replace Sij with an Sji, it's allowed, and A is skew symmetric, so if I Aij is equal to minus Abi, right? Now j and I are both repeated indices, so I can, like I did in the previous problem, the two problems ago, I can replace j with an I and I with a j at the same time. So this becomes Sij and this becomes Aij. Completely allowed. You could do that in two steps. You could call this j as p and I as q, and then replace p with an I and j with a q. That ways. So, but you can do that at the same time. Replace all j's with i's and all i's with j at the same time. Okay, so this is what you get. And this is, if you see this and this, so what you have got is LHS is equal to minus of the same LHS. Okay. So what we have shown is Sij Aij, twice of that is a 0. Okay, that means Sij Aij is a 0. That's it. Very straightforward. Same idea we used in the previous problem to show that epsilon times. If you want, I can actually show that. Some people have problems using the identity when you have dyads. So in the previous problem we had something like epsilon, I may use different indices, epsilon ijk, ai, ak, and then we had a bj. Okay. So what we can do is we can start with this, and then we can say that this is the same as, now I can replace so epsilon ijk is q symmetric and I and k, so this we can replace by a minus epsilon k j I, and this ai and ak are symmetric in I and k, so this I can write as ak ai, and this is bj. It's symmetric because I can just move around the terms. So ai ak is the same as ak ai. Right, and now we'll do the same thing. So we'll replace all k's with i's and all i's with k's, because they're both dummy, so they can be replaced at the same time. So all k's become I, so this becomes epsilon I j, and all i's become k, this becomes ai ak bj. Now if you compare this and this, so what you've got is epsilon I j k, so you've basically got twice of epsilon ijk ai ak bj is 0. So that means that this whole thing is 0. That is exactly what we wanted to show. But we don't need to show that again and again. We can simply say that we have a symmetric in a I and k, we have a skew symmetric in I and k, and the product of that in this sense, the double dot sense. So this is S double dot A. Okay, that's what it is. So this is 0. A very, very important identity. You must remember that. Okay? But the more you use it, you'll get comfortable with it. You don't have to really remember it. It will just stay with you. So this brings us to the end of the 6th lecture, and I hope that you're very comfortable now with the indicial notation. And as I said, I've been saying that again and again, please practice as many problems as you can to get comfortable with the notation. Use the notation, try to write all the equations that you have been writing till now in the sense of partial differential equation vector in vector calculus. Try to write them using the initial notation, and you will see very soon, you will start seeing that it's very easy to work with this notation as compared to the symbolic notation that you have been used to earlier. Okay. So in the next lecture, we'll start a new section which is on matrices and determinants. You understand what these are, but we'll start writing them in the light of indicial notation, and you will again see that it is much easier to show expressions, prove expressions, and derive ideas using with the use of indicial notation. Thank you.